Hey there, hi friends. Thank you so much for coming across my channel. This is your faithful friend, your loyal friend, Marvin Mukanaka. Here again for another interesting piece of discussion or exchange, conversation, as we just start to rebuild ourselves, especially in matters related to the welfare of Africa, but also the welfare of Africans in the diaspora, who include African Americans, those scattered in the West Indies, in the Caribbeans, and all around the world, as we all begin to come together as a unit. It's a wonderful moment that we're living in, and I'll keep belaboring that because it's extremely important to stay focused on that. But once again, before I do little justice to my welcoming of you, I'm really grateful that you could join. You could come across this channel and join this discussion and conversation. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Like the video, share it far and wide. Send in comments, helpful comments, hopefully. But even comments of criticism are also welcome, as long as the criticism is given to us in ways that don't injure us. All right. So we live in a world where we cannot run away from criticism. So yeah, my name is Marvin once again. Today I have an interesting piece of conversation to present to you once again. And today I wanted to focus on a turn of events that overtook Africa centuries ago. And this is the fact that the continent now stopped communicating with each other in their own languages. Even though that didn't die down completely, but the fact that now, having been colonized and taken into slavery and all manner of destruction happening on the continent, we now were forced to use foreign languages. There are four primary languages that have been imposed on Africa: Portuguese, French, English. Actually, those are the three. I'm not sure about Spanish. Spanish could be another one, but the ones that I know primarily are Portuguese, English, and French. All right. So one of the lights of Africa, a young man who is a light of Africa, one of the upcoming youths in Africa, made a very stunning comment. People were surprised by that comment. I wasn't surprised, because it's something I've considered before. Mosi-O-Tunya from Gambia, if you haven't heard of him, he made a statement which many news outlets on social media said that had he stunned African leaders, or leaders even outside of Africa. And obviously he stunned those leaders because many people have never thought about this. But this is the comment that he made. He made a statement that a country can never develop in a foreign language. And it surprised many people, including the person that was interviewing you, a number of people that have interviewed Mosi-O-Tunya from Gambia. Mosi-O-Tunya. I don't know why it surprised people, because for me it didn't surprise me. It has always been obvious that a country or a continent or a community cannot develop in a foreign language. But let me play a soundbite. So not soundbite, but let me play something from Mosi-O-Tunya so you can hear exactly what he said in his own words. Watch this.
Even a foreign language cannot be used by a country to develop.
And you are speaking English right now.
But that is the issue. That is the product of our education system. If I speak my native language, the African, other Africans will not understand it. That is the disconnection that exists. I speak 4 different languages. But if I speak those languages, I can only communicate with people in West Africa.
So are you saying that we can be able to develop with that kind of ethnic diversity, difference in languages? Then what we used to communicate, are we heading back to side language in barter trade back in the days?
No, but I think, we live in a very advanced world whereby English that we are speaking today is not a traditional language in Africa. It was introduced, programmed with strategies. To some extent, we all adapted. Can't we do the same? Or is there anything that exists as these are the people who knows it?
As we proceed, Gambia isn't such a popular country as far as I know, but lately it has come to my attention. Gambia has stood out for three things, one of which is not very good news, but two personalities have put Gambia on the map. One of them being the young man that we just saw there, Mosi-O-Tunya, and the other one is Sona Jobate, a female musician who has become the first woman in the whole world to play the kora instrument. She is a fantastic instrumentalist, and she has a group of guys that play with her. They just do magic with those instruments. But part of the reason why she has become an icon to me is the fact that for some reason her sounds, they make me think of the psalmist David in the Bible. I don't know why. But the very first time I heard her play the kora. The kora instrument, for those of you that don't know, is described as a combination of the lute and the harp. Even though some conclude that it's a combination of three instruments, actually they include the guitar. So they say that it's a combination, it's an instrument that combines the instrumentations of the guitar, lute, and harp. And we know the harp and the lute were very common in biblical times among the Hebrews, particularly David. It's mentioned a lot about with regards to the music that David produced. And for some reason, she keeps reminding me of every time I listen to her playing, for some reason I'm seeing David. And there's a time I remember watching her and I just said, this is the daughter of David. But listen to this.
Is not only a trailblazer in music, but also in African education. And on top of her new album, she also started the Gambia Academy in her home country.
And today we are joined by the multi-instrumentalist and social activist, Sona Jobate. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, so first off, for people who don't know, tell us about the Kora Academy.
The kora. The kora is a
instrument.
The
Yes.
instrument, yes. This is an instrument from West Africa, specifically from Gambia, but also a larger region of West Africa, Gambia, Senegal, Mali, Guinea. It's a big part of West Africa because it belongs to an ancient tradition. At the time, all those countries were one empire. So it's a tradition that is over 700 years old. It's a little bit like a harp. A lot of people compare it to a harp. It has 21 strings. One of the only instruments in the world to have two sets of strings rather than one set like a harp. So
I've never
unusual.
seen an instrument like
Yes.
this before, but just so beautiful. How did you first fall in love with music?
That is Sona Jobate. So these two guys are really putting Gambia on the map for the right reasons. But back to the topic of discussion today. Mosi-O-Tunya makes this conclusion that you cannot develop a country in a foreign language. I agree 100%. I don't know why some leaders, African leaders, were surprised by that statement. I personally was surprised by their surprise, because how could this not be common sense to leaders who are leading nations? And this is the reason why we realize as Africans we are not being led by the right people in these offices. But I don't know what reasons Mosi-O-Tunya gave for his conclusion. I believe he gave some kind of explanation. I can't remember exactly what it was. But I think that he also explained the fact that the breaking down of the languages meant that we couldn't communicate in our own languages. We had to be forced to communicate in those languages. And for those of you that are listening in from maybe from Europe, you are African, or maybe just out of interest, you're in Europe or America, might not really understand what we're talking about here is, just give you a bit of a context here. West Africa is predominantly a French region, meaning that most of the countries in West Africa were colonized by France. And then when you come to the southern part, you've got Congo, which is Belgium, and then the rest of the countries down in the south, including where I come from, Zambia, also Zimbabwe, Malawi, those were countries that were colonized by Britain. So we speak English. And then countries on the coasts, which is east and west, Angola and Mozambique, those were taken up by Portugal, so they speak Portuguese. Up in the north, I'm not quite sure, to be honest. I haven't really done this homework and I need to get to it. The North Africa, I'm not too sure if that was Spain, but I know that some of them were also taken up by France, and there were just a number of different countries that took up those regions and countries in the north. And we know that the north is inhabited by mostly the Arabs. So I need to do my homework in there. I don't know how I missed that. But yeah, that's just to give you a bit of context in terms of how the continent of Africa was split into these different languages. Now, the reason I agree with Ousmane Touré, and I came to use him as a reference on this presentation, is this. This is my own reasoning. Number one, this communication in foreign languages, such as the English that we speak, and I must tell you this, and I believe somebody confronted Ousmane Touré and said, but you're speaking English. Now, personally, after my own research and my own reflection in terms of how we are stuck in speaking foreign languages, such as English, Portuguese, French, I actually regret the fact that I speak English. To be honest, after just my thinking through of how this has done damage, and I'll explain the damage that I'm referring to here, I regret the fact that I speak English. Honestly speaking, I wish that I could be able to speak in my own language and be able to make others understand me. And that's a topic maybe for another day, but it makes me feel bad that we have to speak English. But here's one reason why I agree with Ousmane Touré that it's difficult you can't develop a country in a foreign language. Number one, the fact that we as Africans, or on the African continent, are forced to use a white man's language, English for example, it makes it more difficult, for example, for an author to become a bestseller. Because you're forced to write and to think in a language that is not your mother tongue. So it's more difficult to write with perfection. Does that make sense? And the thing is this, these things are supposed to be common sense. Leaders in Africa are not even supposed to be surprised by a statement like that, by a young man like that. Why is it that Africa now is having to turn to young people for a revolution? Because this is the point where we are at now, where God now is having to use babies. And maybe it's a fulfillment of scripture, where it says God will ordain praise from babies. Because the people who are grown up, who are mature, who are strong, who should be driving others, leading others, they can't think these things. I'm not sure whether it's a lack of intelligence or lack of wisdom. I don't know what lack it is. These things are supposed to be common sense. But that's an example I can give you. So for many Africans, because they are communicating in a foreign language, writing in a foreign language, becoming a bestseller becomes very difficult. And the very fact that we communicate in foreign languages, therefore those who wish to express themselves through writing, their writing is not very appealing, simply because the language they're speaking is not their own. So even the audience that they may be targeting, number one, the audience that they may be targeting may not understand the language very well. And then the people that they hope would buy the book, for example, English-speaking white people, may not really be interested because they don't think that it reaches the standard that it should reach to be able to entertain them or to be able to carry them through the reading. Does that make sense? So that's just one aspect of it. And that in itself is huge. But here's one other thing that is probably maybe even more important. There are several other points I can give you, but I just want to keep this short. But here's one other thing, and this one really breaks my heart. The very fact that, and some of you who are born in America, you're African American, or you are not really white, but you're born outside of Africa. This may be news to you because you don't know. African countries, it is mandatory that they conduct their education in these foreign languages. Now, I don't know if this law applies to every other country in Africa, but most countries I've been to in Africa, that's what the rule is. Or is it the law? It's the requirement of the education system. That if you can't prove that you speak English, you can write English, and you can understand English, then everything else you do is rendered useless. Everything else that you do is redundant. And it doesn't make any sense. So can you imagine, in a country like mine, even if you have people that are naturally gifted with science or mathematics, but simply because they cannot communicate in a white man's language, they are rendered useless. Can you imagine? It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. And so even up until this day, you have to wonder, what is it with our leaders that they can't realize that the education is not bringing development to our countries? And we can prove it, because we've been talking about development for decades and decades. Development. Every president that comes along says, I'm bringing development. But where is the development? Where is the development? So can you imagine people that are endowed by God naturally? Because that's how civilizations were built. Civilizations were built by people who had a natural gift to bring about something new, something useful for community, to provide a service through their natural gifting. But in this particular case, as Africans, so if we can't express ourselves in English, can't write in English, communicate in English, so it doesn't matter how scientifically gifted you are, whether it is mathematics, whatever it is rendered useless if you can't communicate in a white man's language. Come on, guys. Something has to change. Because what it effectively means is that all of these human resources that are endowed with natural abilities to be able to contribute to the development of a nation or the continent of Africa is not going to be accessed, because the mere fact that they cannot communicate in English, we just throw them away. So their destinies are destroyed simply because they cannot communicate in English or in Portuguese or in French. It doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't make any sense. And something needs to change. This is supposed to be common sense. Common sense. That up until this day, these languages are still being imposed on the people. By the way, a piece of news. I'm happy with what has begun to happen in West Africa. Because I know that Mali and Burkina Faso, and I think that there's a third country, they have abandoned French. They have decided to just start disconnecting from the French or from their former colonizer. And so they've even abandoned the use of the language of French. This is what needs to happen to the rest of Africa. And I guess I'll leave it here, because there's so many talking points. But I hope that this can provoke the conversation that we need around this issue of foreign languages, or the white man's language, which were imposed upon the continent of Africa through slavery and colonization. Something has to change. We have to shake up the education systems if we are truly going to develop and resource our own people to become builders of the development that we've been seeking for decades, if not centuries. I'll leave it here for now. I hope that this makes sense. Please write in, send us comments, and just help me understand what you think. Tell me what you think. Let me know what you think. Give me insight, give me ideas, and let's keep talking as we seek to bring solutions to our beloved motherland, the continent of Africa. Have a good day. And as I always say, if you can't have a good day, then at least have a day. For now, let's go catch the day.